Okay, wow, we're already at November 19th. We're getting towards the tail end of November, aren't we?
Jeez, yeah.
Where'd it go, guys?
I don't know.
What is that?
We just started this class over.
Is that what everyone wants to do? Just start over?
Yeah, with all the progress we've made so far.
That would be awesome. I wish that's how the world works. Because then why just stop at this semester? Just start all the way over from the beginning, just test out of all the classes.
Yeah.
Save yourself. Yeah. Start at preschool and take your college level classes.
Tired of the world. When you're like the smartest person alive.
You're building your own operating system at top of one.
You're fine.
You'll have knowledges on computers that don't even exist yet.
Yeah, right. Yeah, true. Music that hasn't come out yet. Sequels to movies like Spaceballs.
Okay, so it's really critical that we get a deployed MVP sometime during this week. So at this juncture, let's see, last Thursday, we did our first set of stand-ups across each pod to identify where we're at and how everything fits into the overall picture, into the overall architecture of our project, of our Capstone project. So it's been 4 days, is that right? So it's Thursday, so Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So actually the 5th day. So we've had about 5 days since we last met up. And so now it's time to check in with all the pods to see where we're at. Okay, so as opposed to starting numerically, I kind of want to have this is the time now where we can all touch base and have a pulse where everyone's at to see how close we are to getting deployed. So I'm going to ask for effectively the pods that have made some progress. I mean, we're going to talk with all the pods today, but I'm not going to go in numerical order. So which pod wants to talk first about where we're at in terms of our MVP build? You want to come up?
So we got the GUI pretty much built. We connected it with pod, I think pod, right? Pod 5's SDK whole thingy code base. I don't know. It works. So we connected the scanner with the camera with our mouse inputs. So everything on our end is good. It's still bare bones, and yeah, we're trying to pretty it up, kind of. So that's
Excellent.
Yeah.
So do you feel that it's now at a time where you can start to move your current task from the to-do into the completed column? What more do you think you have to do before you can have this particular task completed?
What more? Probably just integration with pod 6's stuff, and everything after that should be smooth sailing.
Excellent.
And maybe probably just deploying it to the TV. We haven't deployed it to the TV yet. All of our testing has just been with the camera, making sure it works. So.
That's fine with an MVP build. All you need for an MVP build is to be able to start showing off how it would work with your stakeholders. So it doesn't have to be in a real world setting at this point. That would be for some later iterative build or incremental build. So that's fine. Just having a GUI that works. Did anyone go to the Flutter workshop that's currently ongoing? So what do you think about that as a mechanism, as an interface, as opposed to tkinter?
So yeah, tkinter, it's pretty slow and it's like outdated.
Yeah.
Like yeah. So I mean, all the cool stuff you could do with like a modern, I guess, GUI builder, like a modern GUI interface looking thing. You really Can't do that. It looks old school. T-Kitchen looks really old.
Yeah, not that this is for this project, but if you're learning Flutter, they actually have what's called Flit, which allows you to deploy Flutter in a Python environment. Oh, so this is really good. This was big progress that we needed to make in terms of being able to get our leap motion integrated with our GUI support. And so soon, what would be great, what would be even nicer, what would be even greater is if we can start to have or prepare for some demos inside of class for this Thursday. So, yeah, that'd be awesome.
Cause I have a camera here. If you want.
Let's do it.
Cause your thing's plugged out.
Oh, trust me. There goes.
I'll start. Okay, so let me make a list here too.
Yeah, you want that one? Okay.
Here, can you take this? Do you need an adapter?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna go grab that adapter.
Thank you.
You know. When did you graduate? Oh, yeah. Yes.
I have to change the library. Oh, you have a Mac. Yeah, you can support. Oh, you have a Mac. But did it work? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, that's not. Because I demoed it last year. So it should work. I had to make the icon button to the last page. But yeah.
What is using to code? Wow.
You can actually, I think you changed the dimension, but I think you can make the sequencer full screen.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that,
I changed everything because it wasn't working. Like I had to rewrite it.
do you wonder homework, so you're on a Mac, or if it was something else?
I don't know.
We can talk about that later. So, once you redo the pies, I'm gonna talk to you to add the module. There's a Python module, called mouse. And you just use it to control the mouse. It's very simple. And so I found that, and it's literally the easiest way for us to do it. I was thinking, it might be slightly dangerous to have it just constantly controlling a very important periphery of the computer at all times. And if we really have the time for it, if we want to, we can find out another solution for it later. But I figured that's a good solution for the MVP right now. So yeah, it literally just controls the mouse cursor right now. And then to click, you pinch. And that's it.
Nice, so that means when we use, you could just use basic mouse inputs.
Exactly. It should work with
And it
anything
just
that says mouse
maps
input just by
your
default.
mouse inputs to the leap motion. Beautiful, that's exactly what we want, because it'll make it easier for everyone else to develop your code then, or your to expand out on the system.
Oh, yeah, I forgot.
Okay.
They're actually
Okay, let's see here. Set the lights back on.
Yeah.
Okay, so. What a great set of updates already. So we've seen that we have at least the MVP, the proof of concept build, that we can actually map our leap motion to our tkinter windowing systems. And so just out of curiosity, and then eventually it'd be nice to have the other pods play around with this just to see how that experience is. But now that you have like a proof of concept that's in the works, how's the friction feel on the interface? Does it feel pretty fluid? Does it feel like it'll be a appropriate mechanism?
So I was actually talking with Dan about this a little bit earlier. The one issue that I've been thinking about lately is how exactly sensitive we want it to be. Or more specifically, how to project the coordinates of the hand onto screen space coordinates. Because we have the freedom to do technically however we want to do on that. That's a little bit scary, because if you think about it, the camera isn't, it isn't just like a rectangular screen. It doesn't just have like a rectangular view. It's a cone. It radiates outward, its view, which means if you're like right here, you might be at coordinate like, max 330. But if you're like out all the way over here, the max you can go is to like 700 on the coordinates. And that's, as you might imagine, that can pose a little bit of a problem. And I've been deliberating for the past like hour on how exactly to fix this. You can do a bunch of like trigonometry and math and vector math if you want to be able to be able to map the actual distance from the camera to perfectly fit the screen space coordinates at all times, regardless of the distance. But you might not actually want that, because what that's going to do is, if the TV's on the hall, they're right here, we're going to be like right here. And because we're so far away and it's projecting so far outward at this point, you're going to move your hand and it's going to move the cursor like 2 inches. So how we're actually going to do that,
map it to the actual screen space coordinates, it's just gonna be a lot of testing, basically. It'll be simple, it'll just be a lot of trial and error. And I haven't quite figured out exactly how we're
It
gonna.
sounds like a job for some pods in the future, right? To go through that kind of test phase to find out what's the optimal set of parameters to get the most fluid and the most intuitive kind of feel that maps your gestures to your inputs. But not there yet, right? Proof of concept is what's needed. So this is a major, major step forward. Okay, so going from being able to kind of integrate the leap motion code to the tkinter windowing uh, um, uh, GUI, the next thing we have to really deploy on our or integrate into our MVP build is going to be I'm assuming we're talking about the client now. Let's see what update we have on the server side of things. So I did notice that you did the server repo now has some code in there and has a README in there as well.
So API and database team, we agree interface between the API and the database, so we use that. And as far as I can see, the database team implemented their part. So from now on, I can build the API. And I think the skeleton of it will be done today.
Excellent. Now, all the stakeholder teams that have data that has to be managed at the database, have you been in contact with the database pod just to ensure that you've given any kind of criteria for what you expect or require from the data that's going to go inside of your subsystem to ensure that that everything's going to be easily integratable? Excellent. How's the account system coming along? The account system? Oh, we were talking about having like an authentication system. Perfect, perfect.
I think what would be best for us and the two teams is if everyone who needs something from us could just open up an issue describing what needs to be implemented, like very precisely. So you basically, if you say you need schedule, like how it should look like, what it should features should be, and then from there on we can see if we implement that or something else.
And that's on the server repo. So this is an important message that has to be rebroadcast to all pods. Our project now exists in two separate repos because they can be defined across two different responsibilities. We have a repo dedicated towards what our server, the back server that's going to support the kiosk, the touchless kiosk, the clients, and then we have the client repo. Right now, our current GitHub project board is for the client side. But clearly, if there's requirements that rely on the server to be performing those tasks, we have to either migrate or start assigning those issues into that appropriate repo. So number one, we might now have, since we started a project board earlier before we had two repos, we might have some issues opened up in the client side that might actually belong to the server side. So please do an audit of the issues after today's lecture and migrate any server-related issues to the appropriate repo. That way, all stakeholders who are working on server versus clients have easy visibility on where the issues are at and that you can actually accomplish them inside of the code base, right? Otherwise, you're going to be saying you're done a particular task and it's in an entirely different repo. So you start to get a disconnect between where the task requests are and where the actual code is stored at. So we should do an audit now, make sure everything's in line. But again, at this point, it's all about communication. Has any of the pods been using the Discord channels to be able to cross communicate, not just internally, but with other pods.
Yeah, that's how I got my system over to them.
Yeah, I mean, that really nice thing about Discord is that, yeah, you can not just communicate, you can live stream, you can use Markdown to share blocks of code, and with even syntax highlighting, you can even share files.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, Discord's, I mean, I think I put some files into the resources section even. In fact, we have a resources section as well. So feel free to use that as a kind of a Discord repository of sorts that you can upload either documentation or upload other things into. But preferably, we also want to keep things inside when it's relevant inside the repo as well. Excellent. So, okay, let's continue to go through and itemize. So what I want to do is itemize what has to accomplish. So what has to happen? So let's go through here. So for MVP progress, we've already stated then that we have leap to GUI integration. So that is a thing that's now complete. We have the database schema figured out. Is right? Is that, I'm pretty sure that's what I heard earlier. Schema. Okay, let's see. What else did, oh, we had our API. What's the word I want to use for this? I'll call it templated. Okay. So on Thursday, what other tasks did we say had to be complete for us to deploy an MVP build? And this should be, and think more precisely, not broadly, but think about how your particular pod is contributing towards the MVP build. And if you're not directly contributing to the MVP build, you're probably building on top of a technology that's incubated into the MVP build. And so let me check also here. So we have some comments in here. Let me get my speaker on, as I see. Let's see, test 1, 2. Let's see how loud my speaker goes here for those that are online. Let's see, pod 2, did you want to give your update? There we go. Okay, let's see here. So this is what pod 2's update is. They're working on documenting with the help of pod 8, which is pod 8 here. Perfect. Do you want to just kind of, instead of me reading off of here, I'll let you talk about the work you've been doing and coordinated with pod 2.
Hi. So for pod 2 and pod 8, we're working together with our documentations and keeping everyone on task. I know you guys see me spam y'all's channel at one point in time, and it's really good like going back and forth and seeing how everyone's doing. Some updates is what we've talked about previously, and some other ones is that pod 1 is currently almost finished their request form, but they're gonna ask for more feedback, such as things like calendar date and adding times, and if things need to be what's it called, like a time duration of how long things are going to be staying on the files and everything in the databases. And then for pod 8, we also did the next features that we're going to do after MVP, but I think it kind of coincides together because there's like the event schedules that we wanted to have it posted, and like student hub organization information as well. And then for us, like getting together today and Thursday, we're gonna compile the documentation, post it on the repo as well.
Is it gonna go into the documentations folder, or are you gonna take?
We uploaded last week's documentation for week 1 of what we've all been doing, and I believe it's on the kiosk one for
Okay.
yeah.
Has any of the pods had a chance to start looking at the documentation? After today's lecture would be a great time just to ensure that everyone has an up-to-date image on where the project is at. One thing that I did like that was mentioned in the pod 8's and pod 2's update is that they've been in communication with other pods in terms of some of their requirements. And so this is mission critical. If you have any decisions you have to make and you're kind of confused about how your code might have to integrate with another pod's code, please reach out to the Scrum team to coordinate. Or you can also reach out directly to the pod if you know what pod you need to coordinate with, but the Scrum team can help let you know what pods you might have to integrate with, or they can help be the in-between for you. Because they're going to keep a kind of like a pulse on where all the pods are at and what progress that they're making. Okay, so that leads, I think, really nicely then into pod 1. Pod 1, you want to give an update on the submission forms then?
I don't have too much of an update for them, but like you said, I was thinking about possible roadblocks we could hit. One of them was when you go to request, you could have a calendar date where you could say, I want this to appear from this date to this date. Once this date hits, take it off the slideshow, something like that. And I was also thinking about categories, like when you type your name, your email, and message, and you select an image. I'm sorry, what was I saying?
So,
I have 1,000 things.
and so this is in particular for the images that are going to be posted onto the kiosk, right?
Yes, sir.
So like if it's like a research poster or if it's like,
Say categories. I was thinking about radio buttons that have different clubs and organizations like ACM, ACMW, things like all those type of groups. So you can specify and say this is a request from this club.
so like a date picker for the start, a date picker for the end, or an option to go indefinitely as well, where it doesn't necessarily have to end. A category, I don't know if buttons are limited, right? Would a pull down?
You could checklist or radio buttons.
Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting thing. How many categories could an image potentially be a member of?
Well, I was thinking.
Is it possible that you could be, for filtering purposes, have membership into multiple category groups? Because that's going to dictate what kind of input field you're going to want to have.
I considered that, but I was thinking how many times would you have to overlap between different clubs posting a poster? If it's overlap, it's most likely a computer science department announcement.
No, yeah. It's just if you can identify at least one instance where there's overlap, then you're going to want to be able to accommodate. And just to put it out there, suppose, for instance, that you have a industry speaker or someone who's going to present like their master thesis, and it's game dev related, and so you might want to have that categorized as both a game dev relevant activity, but also a research activity. So for those who want to go and see research talks in the department, that should be one of the things that would show up. But for those who are interested in game dev, they might also, same with CTF and maybe some cybersecurity research talks. So I can certainly see, just thinking about it, where there might be these instances where there's overlap, that when I go to submit to be published onto our kiosk, I'd want to be able to be filtered into a number of different but kind of overlapping groupings.
Just to throw it out there, but could we consider instead of a category system as a tagging system?
Yeah, I think that's. And I think that's probably more of a common concept for what we're looking to kind of include. Whether it's like videos or research papers or yeah, tagging systems would be, and then you should be able to then make your own sets of or pick from tags. Usually they'll have predefined tags, and then you have the ability to create custom tags. Yeah. Well, that's why we're talking about this, right? It gives us a chance to hammer this out in a very agile way while it's still in development.
What are our features? All what I don't want to standardize on our.
That makes sense. We can't have like 10 different pods working with 10 different date time formats because that's going to complicate integrating. So this is going to be one of the things that, yeah, all the pods have to agree upon one particular date time format so that your code will integrate easily with other codes. This actually, I'm glad you brought that up. It reminds me of a story of just listening to some of my cohort when they went into the professional world and started to work on a large scale system, not indifferent to what we're doing here, where we have like 30 different people working on the same project. And so in this instance, the code base was, I want to say it was either Python or JavaScript, because it was a loosely typed language. So you can just like pass data around. And so one of the pieces of data that was being passed around was an ID. And half the team built an object, which was an ID that had a field with the actually ID as it was expressed. And the other half of the team used as ID a string, which was just the ID. And then they came together to integrate the code. And one side of the team had to completely rework all the logic for how ITs were managed because they failed to standardize how they were going to represent IT holistically across the entire system, but just with the immediate teams they were working with. So you bring up a very excellent point. We're talking about date time, and if you're going to start collecting date time from the end users, we have to talk about how it's actually going to get represented in the system. So it's cohesive.
Time type in the database of SQL that like we're all gonna follow.
That is a good recommendation. I'm not going to state what is the format you will use, but using the one that's managed by the database would probably be a good idea. You could probably make a very strong argument as that being the ground truth for what date time is going to be represented as.
Like a big word, I don't know if that would be like its own table, or if we take like columns as foreign keys for different tables, or something like that. Well, no, in the front end we just use different tables. I'm not sure, like the name, email, message, and then like image URL. All be in one table. We don't really have a table, just a message.
Yep, with the submission form, do you suppose, now, I'm gonna get a little bit into the weeds, but maybe not, because I'm just trying to visualize in my head what this interface is gonna look like. Are you thinking of single submission per image, or are you thinking of being able to batch images with a single submission?
So the current setup right now is you can only upload one image. I was just trying to get like you said, MVP down.
Of course, yeah, but I'm thinking about how this is going to look in a more complete form. No, I agree. For MVP, one is fine. I'm going to throw a use case out there and just see if this is reasonable. suppose one of the things we want to do with the touchless kiosk is to not only be able to advertise events that are happening in the future, but to also show off events that have happened in the past and have effectively the ability to have like a gallery view or like a slideshow of sorts of what's happened at an event. And so for some events, you might have multiple images, like a lot of images. Let's say if it's like a graduation, we want to highlight the people who have graduated at the end of the semester. Or let's say that it's like a big end of semester party and there's a lot of activity and we want to grab several snapshots to kind of really clue in about how eventful this activity was. If you had, say, 30 images, it seems like it might be a lot of friction to have to fill out all of the fields almost identically for picture one and then picture two and then picture three. If they're kind of belong together in a way, you can kind of batch them and say, yeah, these are all the pictures that represent the end of semester party. These are all the pictures of the graduating class of this semester. Which I don't even know if we had talked about that before. That might actually be a good idea, is actually being to highlight those students who graduate each semester. Did anyone use that as one of their stories, end stories, or user stories? It just shows you how sometimes, I mean, doesn't even have to be there, but I think that could be a cool use of the technology, because one nice thing about UNO is it's a smaller institution and everyone kind of knows everyone in each department.
Gonna be like, you're gonna accept one, like how can you support multiple files at one science?
Oh yeah, have you been coordinating with the pod that's looking into the various image packages or modules?
No, we have none.
Have you any good progress in terms of?
We have a program that works that, slide puts in that you make a folder. Right now I have it set up for flyers and it displays the images from that set folder and does a slideshow where you can modify the intervals. And also at the same time creates a JSON file for the metadata that sets expiration dates on the images. So you can set it up to where the images, after a set period of time, default is 7 days. After a week, it will stop displaying images and it dynamically updates. So as new images get put in, it will start, and if it's within the expiration dates, it will display those images.
Excellent. Yeah, so if you're working on, so if you need any more information on your own particular project on how images are going to be managed, it sounds like, what pod number? Pod C. Okay, so we talked about image management, we talked about submission forms, we talked about the responsibility of our back-end server and the database and the schema of the data that's going to be contained within inside the database. The Leap Motion integration with Tkinter. We talked about how the Scrum team's been integrating with the various pods. Is there any other pods that have been working on the actual MVP build? Or is that it? Have we covered everything?
That's it, but I had a question about the book.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, because I was going to move on towards building on, but I want to make sure the MVP stuff was covered. Yeah, no. So a question about the booking system.
So Justin, I was talking to him about what kind of table set up, and he put it back in our qual board. So I had sampled ChatGPT.
Which by all means, everyone make use of AI tools to be able to prototype things quickly.
So they were saying that you should have some kind of booking table that populates the schedule. At least you set the amount of time that it's going to pre-populate. Like maybe it'll show you somebody's open schedule for the first week or the first 2 weeks, the first month. So I was thinking about that and I was saying, we would want each tutor, and that's probably, I was thinking also, we don't need a client's table because they had a client's table. Perhaps we could just use our user table and have a role for a student and a role for a tutor. So that, that would be the table we're pulling, or where our set of tutors from.
Oh, that would, yeah, that,
People would- well, and if they are not tutors anymore, we'll just remove that tutor role.
would, so just out of a query, would it be possible for a tutor to also be represented as a student if,
They could have multiple.
good, perfect, perfect.
We have that, so that was one thing, is that we could eliminate the client's table that ChatGPT had suggested. But I was thinking for each tutor, and I'm thinking about the pain points for the tutors.
Mhm.
Because it might be disgusting to keep selecting which hours you're gonna be available. So I was thinking maybe we could have a default week schedule for these tutors to select Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, which hours, if it is cyclical and it
Right.
repeats, which hours they're open to, and we would save that. And then perhaps we would, send them an email like the week before or whatever and say, hey, this is what we have as default. Please go in, press this link. I'm sorry, this is more work for the booking. But
No,
press this link to update what you, because people have events and some things may happen where they're not available at those default times. But that way they can, it's not too much of friction if we just.
Right, so if I'm understanding the way that, this is my understanding, let me know if I understood it correctly, is that with the booking system, there, you would have to constantly input what your availability is as a tutor each week or each 2-week period.
Maybe
And,
there's a better way.
and so like, for instance, in Outlook, you can mark a meeting as being weekly. And so if you do that, then you only have to fill out that meeting once, and then it populates every week for, like, for instance, IGDA, for instance, has a meeting every Friday from 3 to 5 p.m. So instead of having an IGDA officer have to go and request that meeting to be booked into 317, they could put like an ongoing, and then like say how ongoing it is, like every week, or it could be monthly, so every time at this month on this day. And so actually this would be a good opportunity, because you had framed this in the role of tutors, and tutors having to update their schedule. We actually have a pod who's been looking into tutors. Did you have a good chance to investigate any of the kind of tutor responsibilities? I know we had sat down and looked at what the tutors are responsible to maintain. There's a lot of pain points that tutors
There was
have
one
to
more
go through.
thing I was thinking of suggesting. Let's say a student goes in, and I don't know if it's gonna be like when you schedule a doctor's appointment where you select the tutor that you want and then you see their schedule, or if you just say, I want any tutor. I'm not sure how that will work. But let's just say that they selected somebody and that person indicated that they have that time slot free. My opinion is to have that as set to tentative, and the tutor would have to go and confirm that before the student just shows up and it's like, hey, where are you? I'm here, because things could change. And with the doctor's appointment,
Mhm.
have to have it confirmed. It just seems a little weird to, oh, I'm gonna be set. I clicked this, it was available. And you don't really know if the person didn't have a chance to update their schedule, but maybe there's a better way, but that.
Well, it's definitely something that's worth like having a discussion about. And have we drafted up any mock interfaces for the submission to kind of understand what that flow would look like and what the decision to be?
Want to do their work, but I was just trying to think, I need to know the table setup, and based on how they're gonna do it, that's gonna affect our table setup.
Oh, for sure.
So,
For sure, and I'm sure that.
those were just some of the pain points and other observations I made while trying to come up with the tables.
Yeah, and I know that we're on the MVP build side of things right now, but that's definitely something that's worth, especially having ongoing appointments so that you can fill it. Because if you think about the way that the tutor schedule works now, it's nothing but ongoing. It's like you set a weekly schedule and it's bound like that every week for the rest of the semester. So it's almost by default that they're telling the department what hours they're available. Say, for instance, let's say from noon to 4 on Wednesdays, and then every Wednesday from noon to 4, that tutor fills that time slot. Yeah, I mean, so if we want to do scheduling for tutors in a similar way to the way it's currently done, yeah, we'd want to have that capability of, in fact, I think in our MVP build, it's just having the same poster that we already have displayed in there. But we most certainly, one of the high priorities is actually supporting the tutors more so. Um, because one of the big pain points, I think, in the department is a lot of the responsibilities that tutors have to take. I mean, we have one of the pods that are actually working with the tutors or to help build the tutor subsystem. Did you want to talk anything about the tutor subsystem?
A little busy, so I left it. There's like a little bit of set up. We're just waiting on them to like the database you're using. So
Well, in the absence of that, maybe at least the talking about what the tutors are responsible for. So tutors are not just responsible for setting the schedules that they're going to be tutoring on, but they have this book where every time someone comes to get tutored, they have to record like the name, the course that they're being tutored in, the time they're coming in for, and the time they check out. Hang on, let me go grab the book. This is right over here. Oh, we haven't seen it.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm gonna pass it down between each pod. I want everyone just to flip through. You're talking about designing your database. This is the current solution that our tutoring center is using. I want every pod to see exactly how we're tracking the data in the tutor center and think about how we can improve this. So what you see, and so this is a massive pain point for the tutors, right? Because they're not only responsible for tutoring, but they're responsible for collecting all this information that a digital system can do through automation. And then let me ask you this is all on paper. Are we using this data to make any intelligent, data-driven decisions? No, it's archived and no one ever looks at it again. We have a tutor write this down and then it's just gone. I mean, it's there, but it's not being used. And so if we automate it, it's in a digital format. We can instantly use that to make better decisions about how to use tutors in the future. What classes? Yeah. So that is a great question. Leap motion, I would say you don't want to do any typing on. That would be awful, 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 awful. So I think what we had mentioned previously, just to answer your question, is we want to reduce the amount of interactions on the touchless kiosk so that it's effectively would be like using a mouse. So it'd be like pretend you don't have a keyboard. Your interaction metaphor is just being able to move a cursor around on the screen and being able to interact with buttons. So in those instances, like for the submission form, where you have to type things out, that's going to go through a web app, like through a web page that then sends that information to the touchless kiosk server that can then share that or integrate that or whatnot into the touchless kiosk. Now, suppose that you do need to actually interface with the touchless kiosk. Well, such like if you want to register your name inside of the tutor, the tutor app, then you could still have web pages for that, right? So you would, so instead of using the leap motion for someone to like henpeck, like STEPHEN, just to spell out the name Stephen, for instance, what would be better is if you had like a QR code in the corner. If there's a page that requires a user to supply information, then they could just use their phone to get the ability to fill out a form and then submit. That can go to the web server, and then it would populate onto the kiosk that way. So there might be instances we do need to collect more complex input from the end user, but I would suggest finding an alternative than from the leap motion itself, and really push users to use a smartphone through a web application to supply that kind of input.
So our website is gonna be hosted on that. Right.
Yeah, so the website, so that's a good question. So when we're talking about architecture, right, you'll have the TV, you'll have like the Raspberry Pi with like the leap here so that someone can be like, ooh. And then here's a like little cursor, some buttons, right? Anyway, the leap motion connects with this, but then this will be able to communicate with our server, which can communicate with other leap motions. Another user, right? And then so here we can have some web facing. So inside of the internet, ooh, the globe. Okay, inside the internet, you can just open up, let's say on your smartphone, a web page that can send information here and then send it to the leap motion to the client. Does that make sense? And so we have a proof of concept of how this can work, right? Like, and I shared that. So there's a, I had released a, I had developed a simple Heroku app. It's just a web application where it'll launch, and it has a canvas element where you can go ahead and touch on the canvas. It tracks the coordinates on your phone, sends it to the Heroku app. The Heroku app can also be connected towards another privileged user through a different connection that will then report where those coordinates are from the smartphone are being touched at, and then that can actually be rendered in the application. And if you want a proof of concept of that, that's in the resources section. I actually shared that code. Pod 5 actually got that code up and running. So if you have any questions about that, ask Pod 5 about a alternate mechanism to be able to use a smartphone to supply input to your application.
Might not be directly related. We are also getting the Raspberry Pi.
Oh, yeah, no, I mentioned that.
Hopefully we'll be able to see stuff there.
So I was talking, so there's 3.
We got the
Yeah.
library. I think it's done today. Mitch has to have it, so you have a bunch of stuff.
And for the purpose of this class right now, I donated my own Raspberry Pi with a 128 gig micro SD card on there. So you have a much more ample supply of storage if necessary on that particular one.
Hopefully quality. It doesn't fail.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're actual good SD cards. So
Yeah, I mean, it's important to have reliable hardware.
now we know. Lesson learned.
Fortunately, we weren't deploying anything yet, and everyone is still develop on their own systems, right? So has everyone been able to kind of get your own developer environment set up pretty easily and feel pretty comfortable being able to develop your portion of the subsystems? And again, when it comes time to deploy, Pod 5 will aid you with deploying whatever code you have on your Mac OS, on your Windows machine, onto the Raspberry Pis. Okay, so let's talk about MVP. And then I want to talk about the high priority features that we're building on top of that. So we went through the itemization of the MVP. Do you think it's reasonable then for us to integrate all of the MVP individual systems together so that we can have a demo for Thursday? So if we target Thursday as our MVP demo day, at least internally, then we're also going to update our task list. You can start migrating the to-do task from the in progress column to the completed column. And then starting Thursday, we're going to have new task assignments to pods. So now that we'll have the MVP build done, and we're going to select a new Scrum team and a documentation team as well. So definitely we're going to be doing that. So I want to roll all those who were involved in the MVP build out of those tasks. I want to move the Scrum team and I want to move the documentation team. And I'm thinking moving forward, I actually want the Scrum team to be the organizers of these kind of stand-ups, to be able to have the pods come in and have them kind of present and talk about each thing. These are things I'm learning as I'm kind of hosting these myself, but I'm starting to see how to definitely draw this in and delegate these from pod to pod to pod. Okay, so all pods are good with that. I hear no, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, in terms of saying that we won't be ready for an MVP build demo. So let's target next Thursday, next Thursday being this Thursday for our MVP build. Not next Thursday, because that's Thanksgiving. Okay, so this Thursday, we need our MVP build demoed here, and then we're going to do different assignments. And I'll state this I'll state this when we do that. Okay, perfect. So now that we've kind of covered the MVP concepts, let's just touch base with some of the pods working on the high priority features. How are the high priority features coming along? Have you run into any obstacles since you're not actually working with the MVP build? Since you're or have you been working, I guess, with the teams responsible for the MVP build so you can extend and start building the next system on top of that?
Pod 6?
Yeah.
We have pretty much a mock-up with the partners dashboard, and they were just. Yeah, I'm sure.
Oh, that'd be awesome. I'd love to see that.
So I'm confused on that, what they're doing, how does that relate to the MVP build? Because they're like.
It doesn't directly relate with the MVP. So
Okay.
we have enough pods that we were able to assign MVP task, the very high priority task, to a number of pods. And once we said that there's no more MVP tasks that are left, we had remaining pods that can start future planning. So their code does not have to get integrated into the MVP build, but it's high enough priority that as soon as we deploy the MVP build on Thursday, they can start figuring out how to integrate their code on top of that for the second release. Okay. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so we're working in a very agile environment where we have some pods that are working on a version that's not directly this version. It's going to be on a future version. Do you want the yeah. Do you need an adapter?
No, I got all perfect.
What we put together was like a mock-up, like proof of concept of what we're expecting it to look like.
So when we run it, we figured there would be.
Let me turn the lights out here. Okay, so, and see, this is where this is really different, where you were working on implementing tkinter. This is gonna be more like mock-up stuff on how, once we have tkinter set up, how we can start fleshing it out more stuff.
So like as of now, I don't know like what we would put under students and faculty that like integration is. Like, we don't really know what to do with that yet, but ours was the UNO partner dashboard. And so we have it right now where it's hard coded in for the partners. I don't know why on the first time it does this, but after you pick one, like if we pick the Air Lab, we could click select, and then that's the logo for the Air Lab, where it would have 3 buttons for past research, ongoing research, and demo videos. And then you could go back to the main menu and then pick like Gulf C, and Gulf C would have the same 3 buttons. So that's basically what we've got so far. And then I wrote down to like the hurdles that like we're looking at right now are like finalization of like the GUI and like the main home screen and like what each button's gonna do. We haven't integrated the leap motion yet, so we need to get with Pod 5 and do that. Or I don't know if we're gonna share source code too with Pod 7.
Yeah, I would recommend coordinating with Pod 7 as well and showing like some of your mock-ups that you have, and then get insight on how best to kind of integrate that into tkinter.
Yeah, and so the other things that we're like looking at is like database storage of information. Like right now we have hard coded just Gulf C and the Air Lab. So like if we could store the names of the partners in the database and then have it like pull it into the tkinter Python.
So you might want to coordinate with Pod 4 if they're going to be the ones who are working with the database to ensure that those are going to be how that data is going to persist.
Yeah.
Inside the system.
Then it's basically the same thing, like PDF storage, where we're going to store it, how we're going to get it, the API integration, like how we're going to pull the partners from the database and the PDFs, and then image and video processing, like same thing, how we're going to pull the images and the videos to render onto the partner dashboard.
Yep.
Sorry, is that tkinter or is that not tkinter?
It is.
Oh, perfect.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah.
Do you mind after you're done with take a look at your code?
Yes.
Oh, that's excellent. So yeah. Can you go back towards? Can I see the windowed system again? Yeah, that's
I like
nice.
that a lot.
Yeah, that looks good. Students, faculty.
I wanted to see how easy it would be for me to just do it like right now, basically.
I mean, you could come down.
Well, you were streaming, so I didn't want to like.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't
interrupt
matter.
that.
The one, yeah. Oh, yeah. The one caveat that I would do, and this is very minor, is that for things like Air Lab and for Gulf C, I might just rebrand that as like research labs, so that we can use UNO partners for those instances that we get external business partners, and we could give them their own kind of categorization. Like if we partnered with Oshner for an internship, then that would be like external to UNO itself. And ideally, or like for instance, if we have like for instance, Dr. Samuel will find a lot of partners for his game dev class that will come in and do critiques and whatnot.
The thing about the way that I did it, the way that better. There's so in
So just out of curiosity, can you kind of express what you're looking for? Because it might be shared wisdom that other teams could take advantage of once they start working on views.
So I could, but the reason I'm hesitant to immediately is because they're doing it in a much more streamlined way. And the way that I did it was really rudimentary, just like a quick thing. And I don't want to make them have to like refactor everything in a worse way to fit with the thing I'm doing.
Okay.
Like, I don't have use manual, I update it manually every cycle. Because that was the easiest way to get the coordinates updated so that the mouse and everything follows it. I might be able to figure out a way to use main loop, because obviously that's like most of the way that you update. It's just, I think like everything functions. I'm just gonna have to see if this works. Like where do all these functions come from? Which one? So just like these one you made like return. So that we need to find. Okay. And then okay, so like create background is that like when is this run? This one is for you switch this one, so too late to like any partner that you select do.
No, no, there's nothing. I just open things up all the way to the end. It's nothing.
Stop. That we have, it's like, that's what I was saying, like right now, we just have like the two background images as like pictures in a folder in the same directory that we're under the project. So we check to see which is, and then based on which then it sets the image to. We have like a standardized like naming convention to where like Airlab, Airlab partner background. And so like it'll look, if it says Gulf C, then it'll look at the Gulf C.
Okay, so it does. Okay, so, is there any way in Tkinter you think that to call a function every frame?
I could check. I mean,
That's what I need, and that's why I updated it manually. I basically just had like a while true loop. It wasn't actually while true. It was while like null or whatever. But I had a infinite loop that would update the frame, the window manually every frame, so that I could do stuff in between each update. So what I need to find out if there's a way to have some function called every possible cycle on top of all the button functions and stuff, so that we can update update the mouse basically, and also be able to have like the connection over with the loop to interface with the loop. Because if it's in a loop, it's not doing anything else. It's not going to be able to interface with the camera. That's what I was trying to figure out, and I was coming here to see mostly whether or not you did manually or like. And he doesn't know. That's fine. That's probably the better way to do it. I'm just gonna have to figure it out.
I'll say if we could refactor a little bit.
Yeah, that's it anyways. And it's not gonna be a big deal until later because this isn't even going to be a big yet.
Okay, just
so
to,
probably
I
just gonna
think
do
I
it.
touched base with all pods, right? Every pod is able to talk, so,
They basically.
and we already said what the expectations are for next
Yeah.
pod. So with that said, there's only a couple minutes left, what do y'all think about the current solution?
I think that's very alright.
Like I was telling you, it's straight up better. And I don't want you to have to refactor.
Big pain point for tutoring center, we can really help the tutoring center, if they have a TV, right in front too. So we could create, so I think the tutoring subsystem is a very mission critical system that we should try to complete by the end of this semester if possible. Because that would help the tutors immediately, where like we can actually collect this as a department, this data, they don't have to do it. The student could be filling this stuff out when they go into like a reservation or queue system. I think like we should have a queue system. And well, the tutoring team will talk about that for the next update, because that's not part of the MVP build. Okay, with that said, we will meet back on Thursday, where we will have our first demo of our MVP. We'll do our new pod assignments. And then we will, I guess, and then you'll also have to meet with your stakeholders for them to actually interface with the MVP build, just to start giving you feedback. But then we'll talk about that once we actually have the MVP done.